Hello everyone, welcome back once again to On the Couch with David and Travis.
And this was episode number 20, Weaving a Story 2, Oral Stage.
Or, what was the Japanese title? It was like, something with a heart. Something about
That was like the first one,
Yeah,
I really like this one, but
I
it's
do
also
too.
incredibly difficult for me to articulate why.
Well, a lot of it is interesting. What I really liked about it, and this is more from like the education aspect of it, which doesn't seem to work well here, but it actually does. Just in like the Shinji scenes, where he's like kind of thinking through as to why he would actually pilot the Eva, and like he's trying to make an argumentative connection between why he pilots it and his motivation for doing so, which I thought is very interesting. The idea of convincing himself that what he is doing is correct, and how he goes about justifying it is really interesting in terms of just actual cognitive functioning, which I think is cool.
I think it's a great metaphor for people struggling to figure out why they do what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody has, I think, passions or interests that they, like to put time into, but also struggle with from time to time.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we've gotten our share of negative comments, but there's that innate human need to keep pursuing it, even if it's something that, you're repeatedly criticized for or even condemned for.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just sort of again, it ties all into the whole prepubescent and teenager thing, because you feel that more so than ever at that age.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's relatable to anyone almost.
I mean, it is relatable, but I also like how they don't, at the end, it's not like Shinji figures it all out.
Oh, no.
He that does not happen at the end, which I think is good, where it's like he's still like, yep, I need others to tell me that I'm good, because that's the only way I feel good about my life, and I pilot the Eva so other people will approve of me. And like that is so not what is
it's
actually,
not the fairy tale ending.
well,
no.
It's not the fairy tale ending, and it's so not. It's like the opposite of healthy, like the exact opposite. And obviously, we all know like we shouldn't care what other people think, but we still do at points, But Shinji is just like all out, just being like, "Yep, this is how I feel good." Like, and it's not like how he gets there is nuanced, but like that conclusion is so deliberate, because it's supposed to tell us like, yep, he is not a happy or a healthy human being at all, and this is not how people should really be thinking about what they do.
But it's how a lot of people do think.
Yeah, exactly. So I view it almost as like a challenge of, well, I see this person and this is how they're going about it. How do I actually think about what I do and what I'm pursuing, and is it in a healthier and better manner than what I'm seeing right now in terms of this person that I'm observing at this point in time? It makes me rethink as to why I'm doing what I'm doing. But I think we all kind of get into that stage of like, well, why am I doing this? Just to make other people happy, and I want to make money so I can, whatever. We kind of all get stuck in that trap. But then, for some reason, I have this very strange reaction to where I see something really negative like that. I tend to think of it more positively.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm like a contrarian when I watch shows like this or BoJack or stuff like that, where it's like a negative idea behind it, and like seeing characters engage in negative activities, whether it's thinking or actually actions, makes me feel like I have a better control of what I'm doing. Not in terms of like, oh, they're horrible, I'm better than them. But it's more like me reflecting on like, well, do I engage in that kind of behavior? Like, do I actually do that kind of stuff? And I can point back to times in my life where I'm like, yep, I felt that way before. I don't feel that way so much now, so I must be making some progress.
I maybe I'm just a much more negative person, but in shows like this and BoJack, what I like about it is when I'm watching it, I can see myself. I can see this is how I think sometimes.
Well, yeah, exactly.
And I think it's one of the beautiful things about entertainment is watching something and being able to see yourself in it. And it sounds very superficial to just like, oh, that's like me. But it's a big thing that I think it's a big part of art and entertainment in general, is putting yourself into something so somebody else can see it and say, oh, I'm not the only one who's like this. Yeah. I'm not the only one who thinks or feels this way.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be a fantastic or deep or introspective story, but just saying, oh, how they did that silly little thing, that's how I would have done it. Mm-hmm. Or, this weirder thing, that's how I think. And it's an affirming thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think, overall, in terms of why we enjoy stories, like I think there's this idea that we like watching. It's not that we like watching other people struggle or other people fail, but we can relate to that struggle and learn from it.
That's why I always say characters with negative qualities and flaws are always infinitely more interesting than characters who succeed at everything.
Yeah, I mean, that's a classic Tolstoy quote that I've probably said 100 times. Like, every happy family's the same, every unhappy family has their own story.
That's good. I think you said that last week.
Yeah, and that's just like a quote that's so true about storytelling. It's like, if we want to hear about happy things all the time, that doesn't make for a good story because, great, people are being happy, and that's all we... Like, when we see people actually go through struggle and go through trials and emotions and negative viewpoints, it acts as an opportunity for us to look back at it and really think about how we're living our lives.
And another thing they bring up is they sort of talk, because obviously he's in a bit of a depressive state right now.
Yeah.
Other shows sort of tackle this too, but what I liked at the not really conclusion, but one of the ideas he talks about is sort of what you were saying, the Avos would make him feel good, happy, which is bad, but it also ties into the thing where I think a lot of people who struggle with things like this, one of the realizations is that life is not great. You're going to have more bad days than good. There are more time spent doing things you don't like than things you enjoy. But part of life is learning to embrace and go through that and to truly enjoy these short times you have.
Yeah. I think, and this is a very high school thing, just because in terms of, like, developmentally, how the brain is thinking is very concrete. Mm-hmm. And it's very much like, well, there has to be a reason behind life. There has to be. And I need to figure it out. And I think as we get older, we slowly start realizing that there isn't one reason. There isn't one explicit thing that indicates why we should be living.
There isn't one path. There isn't one definition of success.
And it's just like, he's like, yep, the Avas are the reason I'm living is because it makes me happy, because other people approve of me and, like, are kind to me because of it.
And I think it's also with that, too, it works, and we only get very short tidbits of Asuka and Rei in this, but I think they're three very different characters, but when you carve it down, all three of them exist to pilot. And they sort of have different reasons for why they do it, but they all at the conclusion where this is what I do to live.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Yeah. So it raises a lot of interesting points. I love Misato in this episode.
Her actress is fantastic.
Yeah, she is. And I love how she's basically chewing Ritsuko out, and she's saying, like, you made this, you have to figure out how to fix it.
It's obvious that Ritsuko is still keeping her in the dark to some capacity.
Oh, yeah. But also, you can tell that Ritsuko doesn't fully know what's to come either. Like, she's
a little afraid,
Yeah, well, because Gendo knows more than she does. Mm-hmm. You know, and so she like, when Misato tells her, like, you made this, you fix it, it's partially not true. Because she doesn't know completely what she's made.
But that's sort of another thing where she has to sort of face, oh my god, I put time and effort in creating something and I don't fully understand.
And that's horrible.
That's a scary thing about human life, too, because we don't entirely understand everything we create either.
No.
Talking just more about the episode, you brought up earlier with, I think, the Clip Show episode about times to play with format, and I think this was the perfect episode to play with format, because it was a much more experimental-driven one, but it was also, the way it played out was, over the course of like a month, it would show different days, and that really allowed us to give us a bunch of short snippets of what's going on here, what's going on in Shinji's mind. And I think it was just a great sort of pace breaker from the big action-oriented ending of the last episode. That was slower, more thoughtful, but still fast-paced and interesting.
I was about to say, it feels faster paced than last episode, just because it jumps around a lot, but purposefully. And we talked about this before in terms of reusing assets.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of reused assets.
But in this way, it's really positive, because every scene that they reuse assets in, it's a conversation that's similar to what occurred, but is slightly different and a little more
context
meaningful.
Has changed.
Yeah,
it's
what is physically being said by the characters is different in each scene, but that reflects, like, Shinji's reflection on the scene itself rather than what actually occurred during it. So this is a perfect time. Again, we talked about how psychologically reusing animation or assets or characters from other, let's say Majora's Mask, for example, using Ocarina of Times, characters, now is a good time to... This is another good way to reuse it to explore the character psychologically and how they reflect on and how they're growing from the experiences that they've had so far in the series. So.
Yeah, it's not entirely obvious, I feel like, at this point that there were budgetary problems with the show.
Mm-mm.
They're sort of sneaking... Although, I should have brought this up earlier when you were talking about... This isn't the first example, and it certainly won't be the last, but a lot of this stuff about him, why do I do what I do, I feel like is a huge soapbox of the creator and the writers of the show. Like, struggling with creating the show. It didn't get the best reviews as it was coming out. It wasn't super successful, and they were probably working really hard, painful hours to create this and not see a lot of results. So part of that is, why are we making this show? I have to make this show so people like me. People like that. I don't know what he worked on before. This was a Cutie Honey or something like that. I know people like me because I work on that, and that adds a whole nother level to it, I think.
Well, that kind of reflects us. Just in well, especially you put in a whole bunch of hours into making something that maybe only 20 people will see. So what's really the point behind it is the question.
But that ties in is, I feel like me and maybe these creators too, people, especially with, I talk to a lot of movie people and sort of entertainment stuff. So many people, the best people, I'm not trying to, build myself up, but the best people just feel an innate need to create. I would feel disgusting and complacent if I wasn't doing... And not to act like this is high art or anything, obviously it isn't. But the fact that I'm putting time and effort into something is part of that drive to exist. And I feel like, in that sense, I sort of identify with the author here.
Well, why do you think that Minecraft is the best-selling video game of all time? Like,
I don't even know
by
if that's
leaps
true.
and bounds. No, it's true.
Is it the best selling of all time?
It's the best-selling video game of all time. Or at least one of the top ones. Maybe
I don't
League
like
of
that you're
Legends is
taking
more.
my thing that I thought was really smart and then you're turning it into Minecraft.
Well, it's just the idea that people like to build something and have what they have done have a physical, tangible, something that other people can view and watch and reflect on and admire.
But I was talking about like writing and like making movies and building I'm not talking about like Roblox.
Well, why? But kids do it.
I know, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Okay, I'm just saying kids do it because there is this idea behind being human and having a consciousness of, we know our time is finite, what are we going to build in our memory for later on? And that's something that's just innate. And even, physiologically in terms of mating, that's the idea behind animals in general, and really any living organism is creating something so the species can continue, and then we just add a layer of consciousness to it of what can I contribute and have people down the line remember me for. So I have to create something in order for that to happen.
And I'm not saying it's an inherent need for an author to go through everything they write about, but I feel like anything that has that authenticity is going to be infinitely more entertaining, more personal, and more intellectual just to experience. Mm-hmm. That's why so many personal stories are always like the biggest movies or the biggest books, because it adds that extra layer of authenticity.
But I think, at least for me, most times I find, and it kind of depends on how you approach it, because some people want to go back to their past and just like say everything was awesome. Like you said, there has to be an authenticity behind it. But the problem is, and it's also...
Why would I be talking about somebody like making up stuff, romanticizing the past? That doesn't make any sense.
But people do it.
Okay, well, don't do it. That's not what I'm talking about.
What I'm saying is you can't just and I think this is kind of what Shinji's going through. You can't just do something and then expect it to have an inherent meaning behind it. You kind of have to insert that meaning within yourself.
What I'm saying is, a story about drug addiction is always going to be a better story if you have the research, experience, or if the writer itself had a drug problem.
Yeah. What I'm saying is that authenticity is required, and like in terms of at least authorship, and this is what we talk about, in like with our students, there needs to be a purpose behind what you're choosing to do. And I think,
exactly, and that's with these kind of things. That purpose is to help people. Well, the writer is trying to understand themselves, and maybe the audience is as well.
Yeah, and I think there are plenty of people who create stuff that are bad because there's no reason behind as to why it should even exist. There's no purpose besides the author being like, well, I just want to create something.
I don't. God, I just talked for a minute, but I know exactly what you mean, because I was just talking to someone who was talking about how much they liked Amelie. And again, it sounds so pretentious, but I was like, why do you like this movie? What do you think it's trying to say? And the girl was like, oh, it's cute. She gets the boy at the end. And I was just like, that's your favorite movie?
She was thinking of...
She also said, I like to pretend that I'm like her because she's awkward and gets the boy. And it's like, that's so...
Well, there's an idea behind wish fulfillment, but
a story...
That's a whole other conversation.
The story needs a purpose. It needs to make a statement.
Yeah.
And if not, it doesn't have to be a conclusive statement. It doesn't have to be an answer and a question, but it has to be putting something out there.
Well, I mean, in terms of Amelie, you could say, like, well, what's... This statement is, like, what...
Pretty colors?
Well, like, play. Like, a story, a life as a game, almost. Like, there's the... And it's kind of like the Wes Anderson vibe as well in his movies. It's like, they are tinkering with life itself and kind of morphing it into, like, kind of this confection, this game, this
Wes Anderson's stories, at least excluding all visuals, usually have a narrative statement, though.
Yeah, that's
Amelie is popcorn fluff. I hate Amelie. It makes me upset.
Anyway, we'll go back to the ending of the ending of this episode was very totally does not work with everything else. It was very strange, and I am not a prude.
You mean there was a big sex scene, right?
And and it's not even like I'm like, oh, well, there can't be sex in here. Like, that's not what it is at all. It's just like, I just don't really understand thematically or purposely why it's occurring.
I got a few ideas. I think, number one, it's meant to sort of push further, Misato's got daddy issues. She says, you remind me of my father. It's pushing that whole Oedipal thing, because we don't want to forget about Oedipus for 5 seconds. What I thought was really interesting, what I was trying to figure out, was they have that scene where in Shinji's mind, where it has Misato, Rei, and Asuka. They're naked on top of him.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to wonder, is this supposed to be, people's perversions sort of embodied? Is this supposed to be... My next idea was that... Okay, so obviously the whole thing is a birth. If you didn't get the sort of uteral euphemisms at this point, him popping naked with all the juice out of it should have solidified for that to you. So is that supposed to be Shinji's conception? His mother is in that part a lot? But what was interesting to what you're saying is, because I was like, okay, are they just trying to, like, is it supposed to be like a sexy thing? But then when they have an actual sex scene, they don't show anything.
I didn't think of it that way.
And they cut away from it completely. So is it supposed to be, in your mind, you have these fantastical ideas of women or men or whatever, but in reality, the sex can be very mundane, I guess? I don't know. I have a lot of ideas. I'm not sure exactly what is trying to be said with those two scenes in particular. Obviously, there's a narrative point.
Yeah, that is a little more archaic, but I'm not sure exactly.
There's a narrative point to it, because Shinji's giving it... It looks like a pill, but I thought it was supposed to be like... It's like a microchip or something.
Kaji, yeah, it looks like a pill.
I really like Kaji. I think he's a great character.
I like him more now.
It's a very... Well, that's the thing. It's a very non-anime sex scene. It's not like there's stuff flying everywhere or, big parts everywhere. It's off screen, and it's presented just like almost realistically.
I was gonna say it's almost kind of like a film noir.
Yeah,
it's and their relationship is very much that as well.
He's the spy, she's the yeah.
Yeah, so it's
is it an homage?
Kind of, I'm not sure exactly, but it's the tones I was getting from the scene were definitely of a film noir, French, kind of. Just that kind of spy genre is their relationship in general is very much that. So it's interesting to see that kind of influence infiltrate. I'm not sure if that's what they were going for, but that's kind of how I view it.
I like that scene though. I just think it's interesting and refreshing to see like sort of a realistic adult sex scene. It's not blown out of the water with bombastic angles. And
you don't see it at period. Yeah. Like, you don't not see it at all.
And that's interesting to me. That's different. I like that.
So, I think I'm just struggling with understanding it. Maybe if I watched it a second time through, I would get why it's included in there. But I felt like it wasn't necessarily 100% necessary, but...
Yeah, if you didn't, like I said, if you didn't pick up on the fetal stuff by now, then you're...
And the entire series.
But I mean, this is a birth.
Like they said, he is currently... Basically,
primordial
his
soup
soul
was the
his soul and his atoms are in this soup, and then eventually it'll form into a human. Like, that is birth right
is
there.
That supposed to Something about the phrase primordial soup.
Well, that's
a real thing.
That's a real
I know,
thing.
but I don't
the
like
idea of
I don't
primordial
like
soup
hearing
is.
it.
Well, isn't that like what the universe
It's like
was before the Big
dinosaurs
Bang?
like took a crap in a puddle and now.
No, I'm pretty sure that's what they used to describe the universe before the Big Bang. Was
Primordial makes me think dinosaurs though.
I think that's where it comes from. Though.
David's not a history teacher, and I barely passed history, so
We're talking about astronomy, so
like Sagittarius.
No, I think primordial soup is like all of the content and the matter of the universe was in this primordial soup. And YouTube, correct me if I'm wrong, but all of the matter was there until the Big Bang and the explosion and everything got exploded out.
Couple
AKA
other
birth.
just quick things. Again, this was something we talked about a lot before. Was are the angels enemies? He had that whole thing where hostile enemies. You see something you need to attack it. Why do I attack? Was that something?
Well, that's so similar to basically anyone who is like really gung ho about war and fighting other people.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like they're very much like, oh, I'm defending my people. Like I'm defending my people against everyone else.
If you're not with us, you're against us.
And it does a good job of showing that line of reasoning of, well, how do I protect the people? How, like, do people like me? How do they like me? How do I show that I like them? I support them. I defend them from anything. Anything that attacks them is my enemy. Therefore, if you are not part of my family, you are my enemy.
Exactly. It's interesting. We gotta wrap this up. The imagery was beautiful in this episode. The really creepy bandaged unit.
Ooh, I
was
love
great.
it. Love it.
All the kanji popping up, the wiggling line, when he's talking, everything. This is a great episode.
It was a good one.
No, I think it's great.
Just watch it. We obviously talked about it a lot.
This is one of my favorite episodes.
Yeah.
The next one coming up that we're going into, not counting the endings or the movie, is my favorite episode.
Okay.
Which, I don't know, maybe you'll disagree with me.
Well, I'm excited.
It's not as different or out there, but we'll see. We'll check out next time on episode 21.